Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea's presidential office condemns North Korea's provocative criticisms of President Moon. Such rude and senseless rhetoric, it says, will no longer be tolerated. A day after it blew up the Inter-Korean Liaison Office, the North says it will now send troops back into two key areas near the border, set up guard posts, and even start sending its own propaganda leaflets over the border. And the South Korean government announces new measures to clamp down on speculation in Seoul's overheated real estate market. It'll be harder to get a loan for expensive properties, and there'll be higher taxes. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea's presidential office has fired back at what it calls North Korea's rude and senseless criticisms of President Moon Jae-in, saying they will no longer be tolerated. The regime this morning ridiculed President Moon's call for cooperation and exchange on Monday's 20th anniversary of the first Inter-Korean summit. Kim Min-ji reports.
South Korea's top office says it will no longer tolerate North Korea's behavior, condemning the regime for its rude and senseless criticism of President Moon Jae-in. The remarks come after Kim Yo-jang, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, slammed Moon's message of cooperation between the two sides and his call for them to abide by the peace agreements as he marked 20 years since the first-ever Inter-Korean summit on Monday. She called his message shameless sophistry, saying that it was devoid of responsibility and filled with flowery words. The North, she said, will no longer discuss inter-Korean relations. Following her statement, the Blue House convened an emergency meeting of its National Security Council.
It is an act of senselessness to disparage the president's remarks in a rude tone without understanding their purpose at all. We will no longer tolerate any more North Korea's careless rhetoric, which fundamentally harms the mutual trust between the leaders of the two Koreas.
The top office also expressed regret over the North's unilateral revelation of South Korea's confidential proposal to send a special envoy, calling it unprecedented and senseless. It added that the North has deliberately distorted the purpose of the offer, stressing that the regime should show basic etiquette. The North said President Moon had begged it to accept the offer, which it flatly rejected, calling it a sinister proposal that it wouldn't be fooled by. Seoul's top office stressed that North Korea's latest actions will not help the regime and that it will be held responsible for anything that happens as a result. The strong statement from the top office likely shows that the Moon administration will not be swayed by North Korea's rhetoric and will not overlook attempts to destroy the spirit of past inter-Korean agreements or damage the trust built between the two sides. For now, it will be about managing the situation as options for a turnaround appear limited. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, a day after North Korea blew up the Inter-Korean Liaison Office, the North now says it'll redeploy troops and resume military exercises near the Inter-Korean border. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
North Korea has made it official that it'll carry out measures to nullify the Inter-Korean Comprehensive Military Agreement forged in 2018 in a bid to reduce tensions. In a statement carried by the state-run Korean Central News Agency Wednesday, the General Staff of the Korean People's Army said it will resume, quote, all kinds of regular military exercises near the border. The North said it'll redeploy units of the regiment level and necessary firepower units to the Mount Kumgangsan tourist area, as well as the Kaesong Industrial Complex. And it's just not along these areas, both places that signify inter-Korean peace and reconciliation. The North states that artillery units will be deployed along the whole front line, including the southwest naval front close to the boundary. It also stated it will set up guard posts along the demilitarized zone that it had agreed to withdraw from under the military deal, and open areas along the border to support North Koreans, sending anti-Seoul propaganda leaflets into South Korea. Seoul's defense ministry has reiterated to the North that it must stick to the military pact for the sake of peace on the Korean peninsula.
We express great regret that the North's announcement goes against the 2018 Inter-Korean Panmunjom Agreement and the Comprehensive Military Agreement. The South Korean military warns North Korea that it will pay heavily if it goes ahead with action to nullify inter-Korean efforts and achievements to maintain peace on the peninsula.
After the destruction of the Inter-Korean Liaison Office on Tuesday, the South Korean military has raised the level of monitoring along the military demarcation line and has ordered all commanding officers near the border to maintain their positions in case of further provocations. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
With North Korea raising tensions again, South Korea's Minister of Unification, Kim Chol, has offered to resign, saying he'll take responsibility for the situation. This was just about 2 hours ago in an abrupt visit to reporters at the ministry. In stepping aside, he also said he believes it's part of his duty to make way for inter-Korean relations to improve. The minister apologized for not fulfilling the public's hopes for peace and prosperity on the peninsula. He had informed the Blue House of his intention to resign this morning. The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says the COVID-19 pandemic is not likely to go away anytime soon, despite the summer heat. The KCDC says there's no sign the weather has slowed the virus down, noting that there's actually been a surge in many countries. The authorities caution people not to let their guard down because a vaccine will take quite a while. South Korea reported 43 new cases on Wednesday. Of those, 13 cases each were reported in Seoul and Gyeonggi-do province. 2 were in Incheon and 5 in Daejeon. The greater Seoul area has seen most of the new cases lately, around 30 reported every day for the past month. But the government says there has been no difficulty so far in terms of capacity to treat and house the patients. The Chinese capital, Beijing, reported 31 more cases on Tuesday, prompting the city to put several areas on lockdown. The outbreak is believed to have come from the city's biggest wholesale food market. It's now resulted in at least 137 cases in the past 6 days. The city's also closed its schools from today and is holding classes online. Beijing on Tuesday raised its emergency response to level 2, which means that people planning to leave the city must present a negative COVID-19 test result 7 days in advance. More than 1,200 flights coming in and out of Beijing Capital International Airport were canceled today. The South Korean government has unveiled yet another set of measures to bring down real estate prices in the greater Seoul area. Speculation has been rampant over the decades, driving up prices to unattainable levels for many residents. These measures will make it harder to get mortgages for more expensive homes and for those who already have property, and taxes will go up. Kim Da-mi has the details.
To tame South Korea's soaring house prices, the government will further tighten lending rules and designate more areas for tougher regulations.
We've prepared the latest measures to prevent speculative investment and to protect those who buy houses for actual dwelling purposes.
To counter speculative investors, the government has classified more areas as speculative regions. They include 17 areas in Gyeonggi-do province, Incheon, and Daejeon. In addition, almost all of Gyeonggi-do province, Incheon, Daejeon, and Cheongju will now be regulated. Applying for mortgage loans will become even more difficult. In order to get loans in speculative areas, the buyer must sell their current home and move into their new home within 6 months. The government will also curb corporate speculation by improving measures related to corporate loans. While closely monitoring the real estate market, the South Korean government has vowed to actively cope with market uncertainties. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-seok, Professor of Economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, thank you for coming on as always.
Happy to be here.
Well, tensions rising with North Korea suddenly, which is causing some concern about the South Korean economy. What effect do you see this having on the financial markets and the real economy?
Okay, well, as far as the financial markets are involved, if you look at the results of the last 10 years, after the first North Korean bomb testing and missile testing, when it did affect the market significantly negatively. After that, North Korea saber rattling, bomb testing, missile testing did not really affect the market. And that seems to be more or less what is happening right now. Kospi, if you look at the last 3 trading days, it dropped 2% on Friday, minus 4.9% on Monday. And then it rose 5.3% yesterday when they actually did blow up the Liaison building. But that came toward near the end of the trading day, so it might not have had that much of a direct effect. But even today, Kospi only fell by 0.4%. And then Kosdaq, similar results. Friday and Monday, we had significantly negative results. Yesterday, it went up by 6.1%, and today it fell, but not too much, 0.8%. So while the saber rattling at the end of last week and on Monday did seem to have some contributory effect, the actual blowing up of the liaison building didn't seem to affect the financial market very much, and that's roughly consistent with how the market has treated North Korean threats in the last 5 or 6 years. Now, as far as the real economy is concerned, if the situation gets more serious, if it does come to military blows, we might see some real effect. But so far, it's a saber rattling on the North Korean side. So I think the coronavirus is going to be a much bigger factor than North Korean threat.
Right. Well, overnight, stocks were up on Wall Street after U.S. retail sales jumped by a record amount. The indices continuing to regain the big loss we saw last Thursday. What's the story in the global markets?
Okay, well, globally, the U.S. market, as you just mentioned, seems to be recovering, not only because of the good retail figures, but there's also the Fed has mentioned that they will start buying corporate bonds through the secondary market corporate credit facility. They have been saying that they will do so for quite some time, but on Monday, they actually went ahead with that plan, and I think that is affecting the market very positively because that also removes a big chunk of risk from companies. But still, the recovery of the market hasn't really made the talk about possible bubbles in the market die down. A lot of people still feel that the market is somewhat overvalued given the current coronavirus conditions, the earnings, the returns on equity, for economic outlook. The Fed has mentioned that the U.S. economy will be slow until 2022, and that implies that rest of the world's economy will be slow until 2022 as well. And other factors such as total value of capitalization in the stock market versus the GDP do seem to say that U.S. stock market may be at a level of some bubble in the market. European markets are not doing as well, though they are doing somewhat better. Yesterday, they haven't opened their market yet, so we don't know how it'll do today, but at least yesterday it was doing well. Asian markets today seem to be mixed.
Well, the Fed certainly is front and center here. Chairman Jerome Powell, he said that a full economic recovery will not be possible unless there's a coronavirus vaccine. What do you make of that statement, Professor Young?
Okay, well, every economist who's not in finance side, every economist who's not on the Wall Street side, and most international organizations who do economic analysis has mentioned that recovery from the coronavirus needs to follow these 3 steps. First, coronavirus has to end or at least be firmly under control. And then secondly, consumer confidence must be regained so that people will feel safe going out doing economic activities like working or shopping. And then third, you need to have a recovery from the effects of the coronavirus shutdown, lockdown, and recession, which can basically start only when people feel confident about going out and work and shop. Now, we really haven't had the end of the first step yet. We haven't really controlled the coronavirus for the United States and Europe. So until that takes place, we really can't start using our economic models to say when the recovery is going to be and how good the recovery is going to be. If you look at the numbers that international organizations such as IMF, World Bank, and OECD have presented as 2020 forecasts, they're wildly different. And the reason is that as mentioned, we don't know when the coronavirus will end. We don't know when the consumer confidence will come back. So people are making their best guesses. But until these 2 steps take place, we can't really use the economic models to estimate what the future economy is going to be.
Fascinating. All right, Professor Yang, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thank you, as always, for coming on.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.